Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how top experts sell their ideas, their value, and their services. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees. Well, my friends, you are in for a real treat. We have not only a sales author, not only a sales speaker, we have a sales legend, Mr. Anthony Iannarino. Anthony, welcome to the Selling Show.
Don't I have to die to be a legend?
Not in my world.
Can I be a living legend?
You are a living legend, buddy. You totally are. And we're thrilled to be talking to you today. First question. Tell us a little bit about your backstory and how you came to the work that you're doing today, and what were some interesting pit stops along the way.
Okay, so just so you know, on one breath, I can go about 3 to 4 hours, just so you know, but I'll do the shortest version of this. I grew up in an apartment complex, very poor, single mom, 4 kids, started working when I was 13, washed dishes for 2 years. Then I got my first job cold calling. I was 15 years old. I was calling for Muscular Dystrophy Association, getting communities to have a bike-a-thon. I didn't love it. I mean, there wasn't a lot to love, and it was sort of like a lonely job. I'm by myself, and I'm just reaching out to people who say no. And that part was okay. But I found another job at a skating rink where my job was to do lip syncs. So I'm 15, and it turns out there's a lot of 15-year-old girls at a skating rink. So I went over and I moved from cold calling to the skating rink. Very good decision on my part there. Those people came back to me and said, "You're the only person who's ever gotten anyone to do a bike-a-thon, and you have 2 going on right now. We need you to come back." And it would be a great story if I said, yeah, I went back and that's where I started in sales. Of course I didn't go back. There was no reason. I was having so much fun doing what I was doing, and I was getting paid for this job that was just play. So I stayed there. At 17 years old, I started a rock and roll band. I'd been playing rock and roll from time I was 15. 17, I got a legitimate band and we started playing. We weren't allowed in bars, but we got in bars because we were opening for other bands, and we weren't old enough to drink, but we got a 24 pack, so a case of beer, split before 4 guys. So not a bad deal when you're 17.
And what did you play?
I sang. I was the lead singer.
Oh, you're the singer. Okay.
Yeah, I was. I had hair like down to here at that time. And I went out to California to play in a hair metal band, and I had to get a job. And I got a job at a staffing company. My family owned staffing businesses. And I got hired, and I had this experience that you may have had once or twice. I got a new manager. You ever have that happen?
Mm-hmm.
Terrible, right? Because they're going to need to make change. All right, so he comes in. He ignores me because I have a ponytail that's down to my waist. And I'm not an interesting person from a business perspective, but I'm good at what I do. And at some point, he walked over to my desk and he said, whose clients are these? And I looked at him, and they were all mine. And he said, how did you get those clients? And I, not knowing what I was getting walked into, I said, that's really easy. You know, when people come in, they fill out where they used to work. And I call those people and I ask them if I can have a meeting with them. And some people say yes. And then I talk to them and they tell me what their problems are, and I tell them what I can do to help them. And then they sign a contract and they become my clients. And he said, that is beautiful what you just said. I love that. I want you to cut your hair and become a full-time outside salesperson. And I said, hang on, I front a hair metal band. So cutting my hair, like, I'm not in a band, I'm in a hair metal band. That's different. So I argue a little bit, and I said, I would never be a salesperson. They're smarmy, manipulative, self-oriented, they're money grubbing. I would never be any of those things. And he said, is that how you win all those clients? Psychology major. I didn't know it. I walked right into it. At the end of our conversation, he said, you either cut your hair, you can still have a ponytail, just can't touch your belt, and you're going to go into outside sales, or I'm going to fire you and send you back to Columbus, Ohio. So now I had this decision to make. I went to this bar with my friends, and we were drinking Foster's beer at that particular time. And somebody grabbed me and kissed me. I didn't know the man. He didn't know me either. He thought I was Anthony Kiedis from the Red Hot Chili Peppers because we're about the same size and we looked very similar at that time. And I rationalized, okay, to stay here, I will cut my hair to Black Crow's length. I'll go to like Chris Robinson, so right to there, and see if that works. Terrible salesperson after I became a salesperson. Like I was a great salesperson before I had to do it. I was just doing it because I'm being helpful. And now I actually have a quota and somebody's expecting me to do these things. I became terrible. My boss was very, very engaged with me. He took me on a lot of calls with him. And with his help, I won the second largest deal on the western half of the United States. It was a 5-year deal for $10 million a year of staffing for Randall Chicken. So that's what I did. I had to get help because I wasn't big enough to close it by myself. I was 24 at the time, I think, and we closed it. A week later, I woke up being strapped into a van against my will. And when the people identified themselves as paramedics, they told me I had a grand mal seizure. The interesting thing about a grand mal seizure, you're the only one that doesn't know you had a grand mal seizure. Like everybody else saw it and they know what's going on. I had 2 brain surgeries. I had what's called an arteriovenous malformation. The first thing they did is they glued the arteries and veins shut because it was so big that they were afraid that it would be a messy surgery. So
oh my God.
Then that was 9 hours. The next day I had an 11-hour surgery where they opened up my skull and they removed the AVM. And without telling me that this was going to happen because they didn't know, they removed a piece of the back front right temporal lobe. So I lost a significant part of my brain. And I didn't find that out until they came in and told me, like, we had to remove part of your brain. I'm like, wow. I mean, it would have been nice to know that ahead of time. But after that, I went into the family business. It was going $3 million. I took it to $50 million with 4 salespeople. It's an 8-figure business with very few salespeople. And then people started asking me, how do you do that? And then I started answering them.
Amazing. Holy crap. So am I right that you, because obviously the website, thesalesblog.com, that was from way, way back. When did you start that?
December 28th, 2009. I sat down with my wife and I said, I'm going to change what I do. And I'm going to get up really early. And I'm going to write a blog post every single day like Seth Godin does. But Seth doesn't write nearly as long as I do because he's a better writer than I am, for one thing. And he's a better thinker, too. So I got up at 5 and I started typing every day. And it took me about an hour and a half to write. And then over time, I can do about 1,000 words in an hour. Like if I was a bodybuilder, like Schwarzenegger, he's just got big biceps, I would have giant typing hands, like, because I've worked myself to where I can do that every single day. So it's been 12 years, minus 13 days when I was in Tibet. And I didn't think I was going to be able to publish because I didn't think I would be able to get internet access. China Mobile's amazing. Like it's way better. I called my dad from Mount Everest and it was better connection than when I'm in the same city. That's how good it was. And I should have just brought the laptop with me, but I thought, I'm in Tibet. I'm going to go look at all the dead Dalai Lamas and all the rest of the stuff.
Holy smokes, so much value in this episode. Listen, if you are loving what you're hearing, feel free to download, subscribe, tell a friend, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to The Selling Show. Now, back to the interview. Those first early blog posts when you were formulating your thought leadership platform and, what's right with sales, what's wrong with sales, insights, new ideas that salespeople and sales leaders could use. Were these rants or were these kind of declarations of independence or what were they? What was the rocket fuel that drove you to post daily?
I wanted people to understand, and it ended up being my first book, The Only Sales Guide, that there's new character traits and there's new skills that we need because the world keeps changing. I mean, it's constantly turning. And if you're not turning with it, you're being left behind. And some of the things that showed up in The Only Sales Guide was all these character traits. So one of the things I noticed was that people would say, my people are terrible at prospecting. And I would watch them prospect. They were good at it. They only made 2 calls. I mean, it was a discipline problem. It wasn't a prospecting problem. And I started to see more of these things. non-resourceful people, what I call dependents. That they don't try to even solve the problem themselves before they come and ask somebody else to say, I can't do this. I can't do this. What do I have to do to be able to do this? And nobody needs another dependent. I mean, you have to take a good run at it first. And I just started documenting all these. And then I had a developmental editor who read the manuscript and said, no one's going to give you 85,000 words. What are we cutting? And I'm like, cutting? I still have more things to say. And he was right. And I cut 60,000 words on the first book. And that book is a competency model. And it included business acumen, which I noticed salespeople, I know about my company, I know about my product, but I don't know anything about business. Hard to be a business advisor when you don't know anything about business. That's important. And now we have this consensus thing. So you have to be good at change management now. And you also have to be able to lead your clients. They don't know how to do this. They buy whatever you sell occasionally. You sell it every day. Which one of us should be the expert on how you get the better results? The person who does it every day or the person that does it every 7 years? So I wanted to make sure people had a good competency model before I started on other books, because I thought they would be too far behind if they didn't understand. Some of this is optimism and competitiveness and resourcefulness and persistence and all these things that make a good salesperson that nobody talks about.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that because the first book, 2016, correct?
2016.
First half is really about mindset, all these things you're talking about, confidence, resourcefulness, beliefs. When you start, you're out there speaking, you're doing consulting and training with all these big, gigantic corporations, fairly sophisticated sales leaders, VPs of sales, et cetera. When you sit down with them and you go, you know what, your team's primary problem, before we get to all the skill set stuff, which is in part 2 of the book, we need to work on their mindset. Do you get pushback on that? No, their mindset is fine. Anthony, you got to teach them how to sell, teach them how to prospect, teach them how to hit quota. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And do they discount that mindset piece? And then how do you show them the light?
Well, what I normally do is I walk up to a whiteboard and I just write down the competency model. I just start writing them all down and showing them what the whole thing looks like together. And immediately they go, we care about all those things. We just never do anything about them. How do we do something about these things? They know when they see it, they know their team is not resourceful. They know they're not taking initiative. They know that they need to get better. And when they see the model changes their mind right out of the gate. They've recognized this is what a salesperson has to be. It's not what they do, it's who they have to be, which is a very different conversation. And the best salespeople are those kind of people who are resourceful and who do take initiative and do care about their clients. I mean, all of those things end up being really important in the end.
For sure. Well, a lot of the sales literature starts out with the premise that sales is hard. Sales, you're going to get rejected. It's almost like, you have to be okay with a career that sucks. And occasionally there'll be some bright spots, and those are called sales. And reading your book, it's like, dude, you got to expect to win every day. If you don't expect to win, you're out of the game before you start, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Talk more about that.
I always have a tough time when people ask the question, how do you deal with the rejection? And I'm like, let me tell you a quick story. Jennifer was my girlfriend when I was 17. I liked her a lot. I mean, I liked her an awful lot. And she came to me and she said, I'm breaking up with you and I want you to know why. I didn't really need the explanation, but I got it anyway. You're a loser. You're always going to be a loser. My mom thinks you're a loser. My sisters think you're a loser. And I'm breaking up with you. And I was like, wow, that was more information than I needed. That's rejection. But when somebody says, no, I'm really busy right now, can you try me again later? You were not rejected. Unless they go, David, listen, I'm going to buy something that you sell, but I will never buy it from you. And they're like, well, no, that feels bad. But they never say anything like that. So I don't know. It's really it's whoever you are. I think it's a game. I think the whole thing is a game. And the game works like this. How much value do I have to trade to get that meeting? What do they need to hear that they go, that's worth giving you 30 minutes. That's the game that you're actually playing. And the reason people say no is because you say, I'd love to come out and tell you about my company, love to tell you about the clients that we're working with. I want to tell you how our products work. And then I want to learn a little bit about you. And they're like, done that hundreds of times. Don't want to do it anymore. I have to wash my hair tonight. I don't know. Like I have some reason I can't be there. That's what the problem is they think that they're being rejected. Their value proposition is so weak, it has to be rejected. So you're trying to give the client a reason to have a meeting. And if they don't know how to do that, they feel like it's really hard, even though it's not really that hard.
For sure. Well, let's talk about, I want to go back to something that you said about prospecting. And it's not a prospecting problem because you're making 2 prospecting calls and that's the problem. And whether those prospecting calls are good, bad, or otherwise, what is the reluctance with prospecting? This is kind of like a universal fortune cookie question. It seems that even professional salespeople, let alone consultants and speakers and experts and professional service people, who we'll talk about them in a minute because there's other craziness going on there. Professional grade salespeople, they're like, yeah, I don't want to spend my time prospecting. It's both a reluctance and a volition thing. Like, well, I'm not really willing to spend time prospecting. What's the solution? How do we crack the initial front door of that one?
First off, you have to have people who are at least disciplined enough that they can will themselves to do it. So that's the first thing. Like you have to check and see, are people really going to prospect? I won't hire you if you don't love the phone. If you don't love the phone, I got no use for you. This is still the best tool we have. There isn't anything better because all the other choices that are available to you, unless you're a true cold caller, and most aren't, a true cold caller like I was, walked in the front door and asked to speak with someone. That's a very, very different kind of scenario than calling somebody. But you do have to call somebody and you do have to pick up the phone and do that. So that's one problem. But we have to have another conversation about this that's a little bit different. It's their leader's job to make sure that they spend 90 minutes a day prospecting with a good sequence that they can execute continuously. The best salespeople, though, they don't worry about prospecting. They just do it. I think the way that you think of it is it's a lottery ticket. You got to scratch the lottery ticket to see if you win. Scratch 100 and you get 2 winners, right? And that's all you need. All the nonsense that you hear on LinkedIn and see is like, well, cold calls, only 2% of the time they work. Yeah, but they result for 90% of the revenue. Okay, so don't look at the number of calls that you make, like look at the revenue that those generate, because it's the only asynchronous tool that we have. Everything else is synchronous. We can talk to each other. So that is the thing that you have to notice is people who are now using LinkedIn. And I just had a person ask if they could help me with sales training. That's sort of the automation sin that people have. It's a little embarrassing. You didn't even look to know who I was before you did that because you automated it. So they're trying to cheat the system. Nature doesn't let you cheat. You either know who that person is and you know enough to have a conversation with them or you don't. And that's where we are. People are just spamming everybody. They went back to spray and pray, which we worked decades to get people to stop doing. And now they went back to that.
Yes.
You have to have a synchronous conversation. 2 people talking or you're not going to get a meeting.
Well, I'm going to scratch at the surface of this, and I think there may be a good rant hiding behind this little scratch. Anthony, talk about the difference between cold calling or spamming the universe with your voice or with your voicemail versus intelligent prospecting.
Yeah.
Doing intelligent prospecting where there's at least a chance that you're talking to the right person at the right time for the right reason.
Yeah, I don't know if you can get the timing right, but you can certainly know this is the kind of company that has the kind of results that when they're bad, they would come to us for. So you have to do enough research on that. I think it's a terrible waste of time to just smile and dial without having real targets. This is where most sales organizations miss the mark. They don't use a territory and account plan. They don't design what that territory is supposed to look like in the future and what deals they need. If you want to get a meeting, though, and I don't know who's listening to this or watching this, but if you want to get a meeting, you say something like, David, listen, it's Anthony Iannarino. I'm with XYZ Widgets, and I'm calling you today because I want to offer you a 25-minute executive briefing on the 4 trends that we think are going to have the largest impact on your particular vertical right now. And listen, there may not be a next step for us, and that's okay, but I'm going to leave you with a deck, and I'm going to leave you with some ideas that you might want to talk to your team about. And if you want your team to join us, it would probably be very helpful for you. What do you look like Thursday afternoon for what will be about a 25-minute meeting? And then you're going to say, no, can you try me back later? And then I'm going to say, listen, David, I am not going to waste 1 minute of your time. I promise you 25 minutes. If we're done, I'll walk out. If you have other things that you want to discuss, I'll stay with you. And I will promise that this is worth your time. The only reason people say no to a meeting is because they don't believe it's worth their time. So you have to make sure it sounds like it's worth their time, and then you have to deliver it when you get there. We're not very good at this yet.
For sure. Do people hide behind email? You hear this term, the cold call email. Anthony, don't worry. I don't need to use the phone. I use this amazing cold call email template. How is that different than actually ringing them up and leaving a voicemail or having an in-person talk?
Let's look at the data on this. Okay. So the data says a knowledge worker, the average knowledge worker in America, receives 127 emails a day, and they send 40. Now, I have a company that I know that requires every salesperson to reply to every email within 24 hours. So I just did the math on that. That's 6 hours. It's 6 hours to respond to all of those emails, most of which no one cares about, no one knows. But just think about, you send your cold call in, like your email cold call. A half an hour from now, it's on the second page. Like nobody cares. So all we do with those is we delete them, or some people put them to spam so they can try to stop getting those emails. It's a terrible way because it's asynchronous. So you got rejected, but you feel better because you weren't personally rejected, right? Like you weren't personally rejected. So that's one of the things that's in my competency model that didn't make it into the Only Sales Guide is you can't be conflict averse. You just can't be conflict averse and be in sales. People are going to say things. They're going to push back. They're leaders. You can expect that from them. So you have to be comfortable with this.
For sure. Well, I want to jump in to book number 2, and then we'll talk about the new books, and we'll spend most of our time there. So the only sales guide you will ever need, 2016, and then Lost Art of Closing, 2017. It's like, wait a minute, was that first book the last book that I ever? Apparently not. But this is an excerpt and an expansion of what you put in the first book about the 10 commitments, correct?
Correct.
And it's not really about closing. It is about closing, but it's about how to get to the close from the very open, right? One theory that I think you believe in and I believe in is that we don't lose sales at the end. We lose sales at the beginning, and we find out about it at the end.
That's right.
So exactly talk about the commitment cycle that you recommend and how that needs to be a skill set that we embed in most of our salespeople.
When I dropped off the Only Sales Guide with Penguin at the time, when I got on the plane, I wrote 2,000 words of the Lost Art of Closing on my way back home. And that book came out 10 months later. Mistake, too fast. And the name wasn't right. It should have been called The Art of Commitment Gaining, because that's what I named it. It was going to be The Art of Commitment Gaining. And they said, no, everybody loves a closing book. And I'm like, not since Glengarry Glen Ross, they don't. They don't like that anymore. And it's not true anymore. Like, you're not going to get a decision maker in a room and have that decision maker make that decision right now. Instead, you're going to have to build consensus, but you're going to start by getting time. And then you're going to start by having a commitment to explore what change might look like and why it's important. Then we're going to ask if change makes sense right now. Do we have the ability to change if we want to? And then we're going to talk about what the solution needs to look like. So we're going to collaborate with people. Then we're going to build consensus. We're going to figure out what the investment has to be. We're going to review whatever it is, proposal or presentation. Then we're going to try to resolve everyone's concerns. And then we're going to ask. So the ask for their business is number 9. I mean, we're way down there. That's 9 right now. And then 10 is sometimes you have to go back and make them execute what they bought. So I had to put that one in there because so many times they like especially SaaS companies, they're going to like, well, our clients are letting us go because there's a recession. No, they're letting you go because they're not using what you sold them, and it's easy to get rid of because you didn't make sure that they used it. And now you're behind and you're not going to catch up.
Let me ask you about, between all of these things, the 10 commitments, the mindset, the skill set, what do you see as the difference between a corporate seller, and there may be no difference, but I'm curious, corporate seller, sales structure, sales management, sales territory, sales quota, versus the more entrepreneurial seller like you back when you were in your hair band, even now, as a very successful training and consulting firm? Is there a difference between kind of seller for megacorp versus seller in the arena that you and I typically play?
Here's the way I try to describe that difference for you, if I can. If you're in a big company, they're going to ask you to use an approach that they like. So this is where we start to get into trouble. We're moving into this book right here. Build some rapport, talk about your company, talk about our clients, show them the logos, that trophy case, you love it, right? And then ask them what their problem is and explain why our solution is right. When I was at Olston Services in Los Angeles, Mid-Wilshire, my entire territory was LA. I had the whole thing myself. I was the only salesperson there. My boss went with me on a call, and I sat down across from my client. She was a delightful lady. She was very patient. As I started on page 1 of the binder that I carried with me, because there was no PowerPoint available for us at that particular time. And I started the conversation, David, with this. In 1942, William Olston started Olston Staffing to deliver women to companies that were involved in making sure we won World War II. It's 1992. I started in 1942. I go back 50 years to start this conversation because that's relevant, right? Like you need to know how the company started. And as I'm going through these pages, I'm on like page 7. And I look out the corner of my eye and my boss is looking at me, and the look is something like, if you say another word, I'm going to stab out your eyes. And I was like, what's up with this guy? Everything's going great. And so I plow through this whole thing. I mean, it's 84 pages, everything that you never need to know to buy from us, but I'm going through it like I was supposed to. When we got in the elevator, if you've ever had a sales manager, have you ever been in sales? You have a sales manager?
I've not had a sales manager.
Okay, so it works like this. You get in the elevator and they go, so how do you think that went? You already know the answer from their side, right? The question answered itself. And I said, I thought I did really well. And he said, I think you should be brought up on charges. That woman is in a catatonic state and we'll probably never be able to revive her. And I said, what are you talking about? Like, this is the binder you guys gave me. I'm supposed to deliver this binder. He goes, all they want to do is put it on their desk. So if somebody asks them why they chose this, like all the evidence is there. No one cares about anything in there. Why are we carrying it around? And he said, you just have to give them that so they have something to go back to if somebody asks them a question. Come on calls with me and I'll show you what this looks like. He said almost nothing. He was so quiet. Maybe he's one of the quietest salesperson I've ever seen. And he would say things like, that's not even a word. And then the client would keep talking and they'd keep talking. And when he got to the branch that I was in, we were doing 2,000 hours of production a week. And a year later, we were doing 24,000 because of what we did together. So between me bird dogging things and him coming in and being able to close a very, very large deal, we did amazing. I got $0 for my $50 million deal. He made $435,000 the first year because I had a grand mal seizure and moved back to Columbus. Not the best story.
Holy smokes. Well, I'm totally with you.
You don't have to sell that way.
Right, exactly. Right. I don't have the 84-page binder, but I love what you said because I'm a huge believer in some of the most powerful words in sales are things like, wow, really? Whew, gosh, seriously? Oh, Anthony, well, David, it gets worse. And that they just spill their guts. and every possible problem, complaint, issue, challenge, obstacle, and our job is to shut up. Why do salespeople have such a hard time shutting up, do you think?
I think for a long time, we thought that salespeople were good at talking, but better salespeople are good at communicating. And I would say that that's different. The value of what you say matters. And what I would tell you, this book is about how you sell.
Elite sales strategies, folks.
Yeah,
Elite
it is
sales strategies.
It is not a book about what you sell. It's a book that says, basically, don't develop rapport at the beginning of the call. Don't do it. People are busy now, and they're going to go like, time waster. Spent 15 minutes talking about my kids and other things. Ain't got time for that. So That's the first thing. No one cares about the history of your company. I promise you. They're like, David, am I going to get a history lesson today? And you're like, no, you're not. I don't have any history lessons. Are you going to tell me about all of the wonderful clients that you're going to treat better than me because they're giants and I'm in a mid-size or small business? I've had somebody say to me, like, we could never compete with your clients right now. And then I was like, get rid of that slide. You don't need that one. They're like, oh, you work with Procter and Gamble and Coca-Cola and Dow. We're not that big. And what they were trying to communicate to me was, we're not going to be important to you. You have accounts that are more important. I don't know why we still do it. I don't know why it doesn't help that much. They're trying to answer why us. And then you're going to say, our solution is the best. And I always just agree with salespeople. Your solution is the best, just like your competitors is the best. And their competitor is the best, right? They're all the best. They're all capable of creating value for the client. They're the same. And if you treat things that way, it will feel the same and you'll be commoditized. And then finally you'll go, David, what's keeping you up at night? And it's like, you asked me for a meeting and you don't know what kind of problems I might have. Like, you don't have a theory of any kind or a hypothesis as to what might be going on in my business. Why did you ask for the time? And then salespeople are like, well, I need to know the problem. Well, what if you come to me and I say, David, listen, my parking lot's too small. I don't know how we're going to fit everybody in here. And I really am concerned about our coffee filters. I think there's something wrong with them. I mean, is that what you wanted to hear? Like, you don't sell either of those things. And I don't know why. You know what you sell and you know what you solve. And if you don't, then don't bother people by asking them for their time. Like, you have to have something to say. What we do now is we teach clients why they have the problems. We don't ask them what problems they have. We teach them why they have them. And we explain to them all the factors and forces externally and internally that cause those, because we're the trusted advisor. And we're in what this book we call one up. One up means I know something that you don't know. And if I transfer it to you, then you will no longer be one down, because you'll be able to make the decision that I would make for you if I was charged with doing that. So one up means I have greater knowledge and I have greater experience, because again, I take people on this journey all the time and they go on this journey occasionally. So if we're walking up Mount Everest, the person who knows the path and the safest way is probably the one that should be leading. And then when you see any movie about Mount Everest and somebody decides, we're going to go do it this other way, and then it always ends bad, right? It ends bad for the salespeople that let their client lead when they don't know where they're going.
Yes, letting the client lead the sales conversation. And again, what's that about? Confidence, resilience, stick-with-itness, internal leadership, right? Belief system, all of those things. Yes, I know. Terrific episode here, but have you seen our latest web training? Oh my goodness, pop over there right now, or as soon as you're done listening to this episode, it's doitmarketing.com/webinar. See you over there. Back to the good stuff. So, new book came out in September, Leading Growth. Talk to me about leading growth and how can we make sales leaders better messengers of this kind of message and better coaches for their teams.
I almost named it the only sales leader guide you'll ever need, but
which means another book in 10 months.
Exactly. That book is 6 months, I think, after December. I don't know.
Nice.
I'm writing book number 6 right now, but it's not a sales book and it's not a leadership book. It's a book for a wide audience. So that'll be my first wide book.
Ooh, exciting.
Leading Growth was something I had to write. I mean, and you write. So, sometimes you have something you have to write. And I had to write this because there's not enough guidance for sales leaders and sales managers to consistently grow their revenue. And what I did is I started by thinking about like, where do they need to start and where do they need to end up at the end of this process? And most of the time when I talk to leaders, they are stunned that everybody has the same exact set of problems that they have. So every sales leader and manager, I need them to do more prospecting. We have to get them to be more effective. We have to get them to use the phone. They have all these things. They don't use the CRM. And when we do it in a workshop and everybody gets to see, like, we all have exactly the same set of problems. Yeah. And we know how to solve many of them. I only know what I know from my experience. So I'm not a researcher. I don't research. I just know what I know from working with other companies and building an 8-figure business by myself. So I know that. And I know that there are ways that you can do things that people haven't considered. And what I wanted to do was give the manager their version of the Only Sales Guide. But this is sort of the only leader's guide if you want net new revenue and you want to consistently grow revenue over time. And I'm proud of this book. I like this book. I think it's going to help people really rethink about their leadership role. And they're too passive. I mean, just generally, they're too passive as leaders. You may not know this, and you probably have more autonomy in sales than just about any other role you can have in a business. Nobody really bothers you. Nobody's going to stand over your shoulder and watch you make cold calls. You're by yourself. You can do what you want the way you want to most of the time. And sometimes that's a problem for people because if they don't have discipline, which is the first chapter in the Only Sales Guide, not by accident, is because if you can't temper that autonomy with the disciplines necessary to make those calls, have those meetings, create those opportunities, pursue them successfully, then you're never going to get net new growth. It just won't happen. And I've done this. I had one period in my life where I did $38 million, lost my largest client. Next year, I needed $9 million to get back to that number. So the first dollar after 9 million was growth. The next year, the gods of sales, for some reason, were unhappy with me and took my second largest account. Now I had to do $9 million to get back to even. So I did 38, 38, 38. And then I realized churn is the devil. Churn is the devil. You start churning the clients. I never expected to lose 2 of my largest clients within 13 months. I mean, it had never happened in decades. And then there I was. And it took me 3 years to figure it out and to get back to where I was. It's a very, very difficult time. But I learned a lot. And I became a better leader because my natural disposition is laissez-faire. I mean, I'm a bleeding heart libertarian. I just want you to do your work and I expect that you'll work like me. And then you find out you're going to be disappointed if you think that. It will not come true.
So 38, 38, 38, meaning huge loss, a ton of work to recover it, went back to even, lost second biggest client, huge loss, massive effort to recover it. And you're like, wait a minute, we got a leaky bucket here. It's not about acquisition. It's about acquisition and retention.
Yeah. I mean, it's terrible to lose 2. I mean, I have one of the stories in Elite Sales Strategy about how I lost one of them by telling a powerful person the truth. And he took my advice and then fired me right after the end of their season. He didn't particularly want to have any conversation with me because I was a truth teller. And I am. And I believe this. One of my friends, his name's Howard Bloom. He wrote a book called The Lucifer Principle. Wonderful book. And Howard will say, the truth at any price, even the price of your life. And that's his view of science. Like he's going to tell the truth. So I am too. I always tell the truth. And it always serves you better anyway. Like that was a terrible client to begin with, number one. But number 2, I replaced him with somebody better. And that was the gift. So for me, it's the truth at any price, even the price of your deal. And if you want me to lie to you, I won't do it. I don't care. I'll walk away. I sleep really well at night because I never have to worry about anything. I'm always just going to be straight arrow because it's the easiest way. And I never want to tell anybody anything other than the truth. So when somebody said to me, I want you to help us get 800% of our pipeline, I don't believe in it. I don't believe that that's how you do it. That just means that you have a 12.5% win rate. You got to work on the effectiveness, not on that. Well, I want to work on the 800%. I'm done. I have no interest in that. I have no interest in pretending. I don't particularly like reality for the way it is, but a lot of the times, but I also don't want to pretend. And so you just have to always tell the truth. It always works out better for you in the end. And it did for me.
For sure. Well, I was going to, as we're wrapping up here, I've got two final questions, and maybe you've answered the first final question, which is, if folks were to take one central idea away from our conversation today, what would you hope that would be? Is it about truth telling, or is there something else, big macro takeaway?
The big macro for you should be, if you care about sales, the most important thing is to actually be one up. That means you have to know more and you have to organize your experiences so that you can transfer it to other people and help them make decisions. When salespeople think it's about their solution, I worry about them, because that means I don't believe that I'm responsible for good counsel, for giving people great advice, for giving them the recommendations that will actually cause them to get the better results. So I'm always worried. So they're like, well, we have this great solution. Okay, first, Jimmy, it's not a solution. It's a product or it's a service. You call it a solution because you want to ask somebody if they have a problem. And you go, guess what? I have a solution. You may have part of the solution with your product or your service. But a lot of times you have to help that person change something that they're doing if they really want to get the better results.
Amen. Totally love that. Well, how can people get connected and stay connected to more Anthony Iannarino brilliance? Where can we send people? What links shall we put under this episode?
thesalesblog.com/newsletter. That's the best place. The second best place is LinkedIn. But if you ask me to connect with you on LinkedIn, make sure you say that you heard me here so that I know that you don't think I'm your prospect, unless I am your prospect, and then okay. But other than that, I have a lot of people on LinkedIn who have automated this and I'm not their prospect. Sales trainers probably shouldn't pitch me, but they still do.
They still do, right? It's the connect and spam crowd. And the new book is Leading Growth, available everywhere. It's available as a book and Kindle and audio and everything. You recorded the audio, correct?
I did, yes.
Excellent. Why do we still have to fight publishers to do that when we're professional speakers and we speak to thousands and thousands of people? Like, no, we're going to get Jim Bob to read your book. I'm like, no, you're not. Did they do this with you as well?
No, but they gave me, the last time I did one with Penguin, they gave me a producer and he's like, you're yelling, you're shouting, tone it down. I'm like, dude, I am low key. I'm like a low key person. Like I have to go way out. And when I finally heard it, I was like, I'm going to throw up. I mean, I need to be more energetic in that scenario and not less. And the producer was just like, you have to keep getting softer. And I'm like, I don't know if I can be any softer. I'm soft already. Like I'm not Tony Robbins or any of those guys.
That's usually advice thrown my way. Dude, you're yelling because I am. I'm a professional yeller. It's awesome.
You need to put energy into a microphone.
Yes, totally. And there's different kinds of energy, but yeah, I mean, amen. So good to talk to you. Leading Growth and thesalesblog.com/newsletter. That's where to go. If you do connect with Anthony on LinkedIn, don't try and sell him anything, but mention that you heard him on The Selling Show. All of those links will be directly under this episode. Anthony, thank you so much for being with us. You're a total rock star, and I appreciate you.
Thanks so much for having me.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.